So now that we've washed and dried our greens, I'm going to show you a really quick way to braise the greens that we have in front of us. Remember, I've selected greens appropriate for braising. So they're the hardy, usually very dark leafed greens. I have rainbow chard, the tops of some beets. The beets have already been used. I reserved the tops. And then I'm also throwing in some radish tops as well. Mixed them all together, broke them down into bite-sized pieces or a little bit larger, washed them, and now we're going to introduce a little heat. Braising is probably what I like to do most as far as these greens go. You could quickly do a saute, just a little bit of olive oil in a hot pan and wilt them. Give them salt and pepper when they're wilting. Anything green likes salt. It's going to help set the color. Make sure you season them with salt as soon as they hit the pan to keep them bright and green, to avoid that drab army green, which happens a lot when we're braising greens. What I've done here is in this large, wide pan, I want to give myself a lot of surface area. I cooked off some bacon ahead of time until it was nice and crisp. I removed the bacon, and what's left in the pan is bacon fat. Best way, in my mind, to start the greens. If you're opposed to the bacon, certainly just start it with oil, whatever oil you like. Olive oil will be absolutely fine in this case. So the pan is warming up again. I'm warming up the fat in the base of the pan. And what I'll begin with is a little bit of a small dice of sweet yellow onion. And then I have some slivered or sliced garlic. So I want to start with these two in the pan first because they're going to take a little bit longer to cook than our greens. Our pan's feeling nice and warm. We have a nice amount of that bacon fat left. In with our aromatics. Use caution anytime you're cooking with garlic. Because I've sliced this garlic, it's in a bit of a larger pieces, which is fine. If you have minced garlic and you dump it into hot oil, you're most likely going to burn your garlic almost immediately. It's really hard to get rid of that burnt garlic flavor. My garlic's going to go in next on top of my onion. And I just want to quickly start the cooking process before we introduce our greens. We want to make sure we have some liquid on hand because we are braising. Braising generally means coming up halfway. So the item in the pan, the liquid needs to come halfway up, whatever happens to be in the pan. It could be pork shoulder, it could be greens. You want to make sure you have an adequate amount of liquid in the pan. In this case, we're going to use a little apple cider vinegar as our liquid and just simply water. That'll do the trick. Onions, garlic, looking like they're softening up. In go our greens. It should fill the pan. Remember, these are going to cook down quite a bit. This amount of greens that were in here, I would say would feed 4 people. If you eat them like I do, I probably could handle about half of this amount myself. So you are going to lose a lot of your greens. Salt and pepper immediately. Remember the importance of the salt on the greens. It's going to help set that nice bright green color. Before I introduce any liquid, I just want to start wilting down the greens. And this is just how you would start the saute process if you wanted to saute your greens. If you wanted to keep things healthy and avoid the added oil or the added fat, simply steam the greens. Whatever steaming device you have at home, it could be a steaming basket, it could be a steaming insert on top of a pan. Get water simmering below, introduce your greens on the top, just until they wilt down, and you have very, very quick, very, very healthy steamed greens. So my greens are starting to wilt, looking really beautiful in the pan. At this point in time, I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar. You could add whatever vinegar you have on hand. I like the apple cider vinegar because it's going to add a little more sweetness to our greens. Watch out for dark vinegars, however. If you threw in balsamic, yes, it would taste really nice, but it's going to give you a very muddy appearance as far as the end result of the greens. Now that I have a little vinegar in here, I need to add just a little bit of water because remember, like I said, braising, the liquid needs to come halfway up the greens in the pan. So I'm now adding water into that vinegar mixture and coming halfway up the greens. Everything should come to a simmer as quickly as possible. Going to give everything a toss, and then it's important to throw a lid on. So what we're actually doing is sort of a combination cooking method. We're doing, starting out with a saute, adding liquid, that becomes a braise, and then we're introducing a lid, which technically becomes a steam. You've got your tight-fitting lid over top of your greens that are braising below. I would say this is only going to take about 5 minutes, depending on how much you have. The darker the green, so if you have a lot of kale, a lot of chard, you're probably going to want to braise it a little bit longer to break it down just a bit. Because I have a nice mix going, and I have some tender greens in here, the radish tops, things like that, I do not want to overdo it with the braising. So 5 minutes is what I think it's going to take. After these have sufficiently broken down to the point where I want them, I'm going to toss in our bacon that I started in the pan, and then they're ready to eat to the table. You can definitely eat these hot. I don't mind if they cool down to room temperature. I don't really enjoy eating cooked greens cold. However, you certainly could. Things are looking really beautiful in the pan. Because I use the salt, I have maintained that beautiful green color. At this point in time, they're ready for service. First and foremost, I'm going to taste, just like I do with all of my food, to make sure my seasoning is on. Greens do require a bit of salt to get a nice flavor, so I want to taste these and make sure I'm okay with the salt. Perfect. If I needed to add more salt, I would want to do it in this stage of the game because I actually want to give the salt an opportunity to dissolve in the hot liquid. You could use a slotted spoon to pull your greens out if you don't want all that extra liquid. Or if you don't mind the liquid, just simply dump them out. I have a lot of liquid in the bottom of my pan, so I'm actually using a slotted spoon so I don't flood my dish. Like I said, keeping the stem on that rainbow chard, as you can see, has really given us some gorgeous color. And last but certainly not least, I am going to reintroduce that bacon that I crisped. And you can just sprinkle that right over the top to showcase that bacon and get a little salty applewood smoked bite with your greens. So here it is, simple braised greens.